Chapter 11, Part 2, Part T, really. Page, Scientific Rationale for Olympic Lifting. The Scientific Rationale Olympic Lifting, page 393. The hip hinge. The spine must remain stable and neutral in order to create powerful lower body movements. With this, the athlete must learn to disassociate hip movement from spinal movement. So they're independent joints. The concept of a proper hip hinge is best described as the spine remaining stiff and neutral while movement occurs about the hip. Hip hinge. The concept of the hip hinge can be described as the spine remaining stiff and neutral while movement occurs about the hip joint. This movement pattern is learned cognitively, beginning with only the body weight as resistance before progressing to the Olympic lifts that reinforce the hip hinge with the use of a load. The Olympic lifts and the vertical jump, their relationship to sports performance. The vertical jump test is the most widely accepted test for assessing explosive power, body power. In 2004 and 2005, National Football League combined drafted skills players, receivers, defensive backs, running backs, jumped on average 4 centimeters higher than non-drafted skill players, and drafted big skill players, linebackers, tight ends, fullbacks, defensive ends, as well as linemen also jumped higher than their non-drafted counterparts. Vertical jump performance seems to be correlated with success in sports where explosive power is necessary. In football, there is a strong relationship between playing ability and vertical jump, stronger even than the 40-yard dash. Female Division I volleyball players jumped, on average, 4.6 inches higher than Division II players, 6.2 inches higher than Division III players. 2 articles highlighting the importance of weightlifting point to similar studies in support of Olympic lifts to improve vertical jump performance and thus athletic performance. Studies include, skip the studies. There is ample scientific rationale to incorporate Olympic lift into a sports performance enhancement program. Although no study can be considered as definitive, cause-effect proof, the literature consistently provided evidence that the Olympic lifts improve rate of force development, high load speed strength, maximum strength, explosive power, and vertical jump performance using movement patterns similar to many sport skills. The combination of all these factors will undoubtedly improve sports performance. Page 395. Olympic lifting prerequisites and how they affect lifting. Olympic lifting prerequisites and how they affect lifting. Techniques. Flexibility and mobility. To perform the full Olympic lifts, snatch, clean, and jerk, an athlete must be able to perform the deep catch position. This requires maximum flexibility of plantar flexors, knee extensors, hip extensors, elbow extensors, and wrist flexors. Not only does the involved musculature need to be flexible, but also involved joints need to display full mobility. For example, maximum ankle dorsiflexion is 20 degrees, knee flexion is 135 degrees, and hip flexion is 120 degrees. If one of these joint ranges cannot be achieved, then the full depth cannot be realized and compensations can occur. When considering the snatch and the clean exercises only, the athlete must achieve the full deep catch position. With normal ankle dorsiflexion being 20 degrees, it becomes difficult to sit in the full clean and snatch positions described below without shifting the center of gravity too far posteriorly. In order to achieve the full deep catch position, a specialized weightlifting shoe with a heel lift is sometimes used. If the weightlifting shoe is not used and dorsiflexion is limited, the focus should be on the power clean and power snatch as opposed to the full lifts. These lifts use a higher catch position, making full ankle dorsiflexion, knee flexion, and hip flexion unnecessary. These lifts use a higher catch position, making full ankle dorsiflexion, knee flexion, and hip flexion unnecessarily. Higher catch. Flexibility techniques to improve calf extensibility and ankle dorsiflexion should be practiced in order to perform the full Olympic lifts with less compensation. A second example, Olympic lifting for performance, Chapter 11. The second example involves a snatch and jerk. In the catch phase of both the snatch and of the jerk, the bar is held directly overhead, which requires full shoulder flexion. A limited range of shoulder flexion due to tightness in the latissimus dorsi can lead to compensation in the lower back, excessive lumbar spine. This is due to the latissimus dorsi's attachment to the region via the thoracolumbar fascia. This can increase stress to the lumbar spine and lead to potential injuries. In this case, the athlete may have to compromise by using the snatch pull variations and avoiding the jerk, no overhead motion, while incorporating flexibility techniques in their program to enhance latissimus dorsi extensibility and thus shoulder range of motion. Wow. Good loosey lats is a happy back and happy shoulder. SIF, stability. SIF has described all dynamic movement as being triphastic in nature. He describes movement as beginning with a stabilizing contraction followed by a concentric contraction, then an eccentric contraction. All human movement is preceded by a stabilizing contraction. The human movement system is comprised of local stabilizers, global stabilizers, and global movers. In functional movements, like lifting free weights, the local and global stabilizers must be recruited prior to the movement in order to safely perform the movement. Hodges and Richardson have suggested the need for a drawing in maneuver to activate the local stabilizers, while McGill offers the abdominal brace as a method to provide trunk stability, activation of the global stabilizers. Several recent studies have found that an antagonistic torso co-contraction increases spinal stability during lifting tasks. And one of these studies suggested that another benefit of the torso co-contraction may be to increase control of the path of the object being lifted. These stability cues are essential before performing any Olympic lift movement, whether starting from the floor, off a box, or from the hang, due to the importance of a stiff, stable spine during lifting tasks. The athlete must develop the neuromuscular control before engaging in any of the Olympic lifts to ensure the safety and effectiveness of the lifts. This is one of the reasons why stabilization training should precede strength and power training. Once neuromuscular control is established, the Olympic lifts are an excellent progression to incorporate the stability cues into a dynamic movement that the lifter must cognitively create. This will be reinforced over time through high repetition to create neural pathways that will occur with less consciousness thought. This will be reinforced over time through high repetition to create neural pathways that will occur with less conscious thought and become more automatic. As the athlete learns how to stabilize the trunk and can perform the lifting techniques properly, load can then be increased, allowing for greater strength gains of both the local and global systems. One other stability cue that is important prior to lifting the bar from any starting position is scapular retraction. While the torso antagonistic co-contractions help to stabilize the spine, scapular retraction enhances global stabilization of the spine and local stabilization of the glenohumeral joint. While the torso antagonistic co-contractions help to stabilize the spine, scapular retraction enhances global stabilization of the spine and a local stabilization of the glenohumeral joint. On top of this, the Olympic lifting coaches recommend contracting the latissimus dorsal in order to control the path of the bar, to keep the bar close to the body. Posture. Proper posture makes lifting tasks easier because the decreased load and shear on the spine from the correct posture increases the biomechanical advantages. The neutral tri-curve spine posture provides for the highest levels of spinal stability, biomechanical advantage, and efficient muscle activation during lifting. A 2007 study showed that when the global spinal extensor muscles take on curved paths, muscle force and spinal compression significantly decreases, but shear forces increase at the L5 and S1, through the S1, suggesting that slight flattening of the lumbar spine reduces load and shear at the level of L5 and S1. This suggests that there is no single, perfect, neutral posture for all human movements and tasks, but that this neutrality changes slightly with various tasks. The proper lifting posture must be trained with high repetition and low load until the neuromuscular system can accurately and effectively reproduce the proper positions. Failure to achieve the proper posture can produce low performance and injury. Low performance. The athlete who is unable to achieve the posture necessary to lift a weight from the floor should have their starting position changed with the use of blocks, combined with flexibility and stability exercises to improve postural control. When performing the Olympic lifts or any explosive movement, poor posture should be corrected first by stopping the exercise and resetting the torso stability cues. Pelvic floor, obliques, and scapula retraction. Once neutral posture is achieved and stabilized, the exercise can be continued. Lack of postural control may also be an indicator that the athlete does not have proper amounts of flexibility, stability, or both, and may need to eliminate these lifts from their program until these components are improved. Eliminate these lifts. Pro tip: perturbation. When applied to human movement, this would entail any disruption in the normal pattern of movement, a disturbance in the relationship of the center of mass to the base of support. Utilize stabilization training to maximize the challenge given to the athlete through the application of perturbations. Neuromuscular control. The Olympic lifts and their derivatives are functional, closed-chain exercises in which the main action occur in the frontal and sagittal planes, although stability is occurring in all three planes of motion. Complete neuromuscular control is necessary to perform the Olympic lifts because any perturbation in the desired movement patterns increases the chances of breakdown in the human movement system. Adding an external load, like in weightlifting, to this insufficient system can only worsen the problem and lead to injury. The TLF, thoracolumbar fascia, between the upper and the lower body, while the TLF transfers loads between the upper and lower body, while at the same time stabilizing the lower spine and sacroiliac joint. Fleming state that the latissimus dorsi may be functionally coupled to the gluteus maximus via the TLF. In the Olympic lifts, as well as in the vertical jump, the proper proximal to distal neuromuscular firing sequence should be core and trunk stability, hip extension, knee extension, and plantar flexion. This sequential firing pattern combines both the proper timing and intensity of muscular contractions. The highest intensity of muscle activation occurs in the hip extensors and decreases as it moves down the chain through knee extension and plantar flexion. If torso and core stability is poor or non-existent, then the gluteus maximus may not fire with the proper timing and intensity as the primary hip extensors, altering the desired force-coupled relationships, meaning the hamstrings and the lumbar extensors take over as the primary hip extensors in a compensatory reaction, synergistic dominance. So your glutes are supposed to fire. The Olympic lifts are complex, loaded exercises that require normal function of the neuromuscular system. For proper and efficient movement, poor movement patterns need to be resolved prior to performing the Olympic lifts. Perturbed movement patterns need to be addressed and improved in the phase 1 stabilization endurance training of OPT model. Once corrected, the Olympic lifts can then be incorporated in phases 4, 5, and 6 of the model, where the maximal strength and power is the goal. Many of the issues surrounding an athlete's functional qualifications for the use of the Olympic lifts can be determined easily by performing the overhead single leg squat assessment. If compensations are present when performing these assessments, Olympic lifting may not be a viable option until movement deficiencies are corrected Olympic lifting may not be a viable option until movement deficiencies are corrected. Once corrected, the athlete will have an enhanced ability to generate force more effectively through optimal length tension and force couple relationships, and decrease the risk of injury. Then I'll close it.